Time to talk about the closer.
Everything bothers me.
What's up, everybody? Ty Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. So here's the deal, you guys. Everybody's up in arms about The Closer by Dave Chappelle. If you're not familiar with The Closer, that's Dave Chappelle's last special for a little while that he's going to be doing. It was shot for Netflix. It's caused an uproar. It's caused a lot of people to say things that just aren't true. It's caused a lot of people to really show a dumb side of themselves, and I want to talk a little bit about it. I know that as a gay comic, there are going to be people that get mad at me for the things that I say about this, but who cares? I mean, I'm so tired of having to coddle the LGBTQ plus community about everything, and it's exhausting, and nobody wants to do it anymore. And that's why Netflix isn't getting rid of Dave Chappelle's special. They were trying to boycott it. Some of the LGBTQ community was trying to boycott The Closer and boycott Netflix because they wanted Netflix to pull it down. And Netflix was like, we're not pulling it down. And I'm sure that has to do with the fact that it is really popular, and whether people like it or not, it's gotten a lot of people talking. That's why, when I said people are saying things that aren't true, there were several people I saw on Facebook and Twitter being like, is Dave Chappelle even relevant anymore? He's not even relevant. He's got the whole world talking about him. He got paid millions and millions of dollars to shoot the specials that he shot for Netflix. He's probably right now the most successful comedian in all of the entertainment industry. So yeah, he's relevant. He's also a black man talking about his experiences, not only with the LGBTQ community, but just his observations and experiences in life in general. And every once in a while, he borderlines on absurdist. So I don't know why everybody takes him so seriously. And I don't know why, if you say that you even thought the special was okay, that suddenly you must be fanning out for Dave Chappelle. I am not fanning out for Dave Chappelle on any level. I sat across from Dave Chappelle once at a swingers. We were having a late night dinner, breakfast type of thing with another mutual friend. I wasn't starstruck. I didn't feel any particular way about it. I'm not a fanboy like that. I'm not a Dave Chappelle devotee. I'm just a person who actually loves stand-up comedy. Dave Chappelle happens to do stand-up comedy. I happen to do stand-up comedy. When he puts something out, I'm probably going to watch it, just like I'm going to watch Chris Rock, just like I will check out Bill Burr, just like I'll check out any major stand-up. I don't watch all of the Netflix stand-up. Some of it just doesn't appeal to me. And sometimes I'll watch things and they don't appeal to me, but I know that they're important for me to watch as a stand-up because everybody's going to be talking about them. I watched The Closer the day that it came out. Literally, it came out at like midnight on whatever day. That same day I watched it. And I thought it was okay, but I didn't think it was his best special, and it wasn't what made me originally really like his stand-up, because I really used to like Dave Chappelle. Now I'm kind of take it or leave it with Dave Chappelle. Like, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. Like, I thought his SNL appearance was less than stellar, and this special, to me, it was just okay, but I did think he said some important stuff. As far as it not being his best special, I don't really blame him as a stand-up comic. I blame Dave Chappelle, the businessman, for that, because he had to produce a special for Netflix, in order to meet his contract obligations. And so maybe everything he said wasn't fully formed or the way that he wanted it to come out, or maybe that is the way he planned for it to come out. But to me, a lot of it to me felt like unfinished thoughts. I think that when it comes to Dave Chappelle's Closer, no, it wasn't his best efforts as far as stand-up comedy goes. But as far as just being willing to say, hey, I'm going to say what I want to say and you're not going to stop me, and I don't care who you are, it was a great exercise in that. And I thought it was very important, not only for society to hear what he was saying, but especially for stand-up comics to hear that and just be like, yeah, I don't always have to bow down because somebody else thinks that I'm going to bow down. I say plenty of things in my set about everybody that some people could get offended about. And I'm not to the point, obviously, that Dave Chappelle is at yet. So it doesn't have the same ripple effect, and it doesn't affect society, and people don't come after me the same way. But people definitely have tried to cancel me, even as recently as a year ago. Back in June of 2020, they were trying to cancel me, and it was the LGBT community. And the fact that people are so offended by just the parts that he said about trans people, he opens with a joke about coming in a preacher's face. Like, literally, he opens with the joke about coming in a preacher's face. Nobody noticed that. If anybody wanted to be offended about that, they could have been, but nobody was. Instead, everybody was just offended about his LGBTQ comments. And he doesn't even mention LGBTQ until 10 minutes and 7 seconds into his set. And he did mention how the baby who got in all that trouble over what he said about people with AIDS and sucking dick in the parking lot and women with pussy that smells like water and whatever else everybody was up in arms about with the baby. But Dave Chappelle's point was that the baby had shot somebody at another point in his life and he didn't go to jail for that, didn't affect his career. And the line that Dave Chappelle gave was, you can literally shoot a black person, and of course he said the N-word, but you could literally shoot and kill a black person, but you better not hurt a gay person's feelings, which that's kind of what it's turned into. I hate to tell everybody, but it really has turned into that. And a lot of people are tired of bowing down to the LGBTQ community. And especially when it comes to trans in particular. Like I said, I've had many trans friends in my life. I have trans friends right now. I have lifelong trans friends. And I don't really know them to be as sensitive as the community paints it to be. Like, there just seem to be a very particular group of trans people who are typically white, and not for nothing I bring that up, because, you know, there is something to that. It is something to the fact that there was once a comic that told me, and I won't say her name, she's black, she's female, she's a comic, she works quite a bit in LA, and we were once on our way to a gig together. And the only reason I'm not saying her name is because I know that she could get in trouble for saying this. But she once said that she notices that a lot of the trans people that are getting offended are white trans women, which have all their life been white men until they made the transition. And she was like, yeah, and that seems to be because when you're a white man, everything else is bullshit. So, of course, once you transition to being a woman and then you get treated like a woman, which you get less respect, you get paid attention to less, suddenly, yeah, of course you're offended because you're used to being a white man and everybody paying attention. Dave Chappelle said something similar at a point where he mentioned that, you know, something about white men, and then he was like, now you switch to being a woman and I got to respect you. And it's kind of the way it works, you know? And he also said that he was jealous of gay people, you know, because their movement has gone so fast and black people have been fighting for their rights for so long, and the gay movement has moved along quite quickly, and that's something I think we can all agree with. Then he said that he misses like the Stonewall gay people, which I miss that tough type of gay too. Like, that's closer to what I am than what is currently happening in the LGBT community, and I'm tired of being expected to apologize for it. Like, I'm not looking to Dave Chappelle or anybody else for approval, and I don't know why the trans community is. I don't know why the trans community doesn't just choose to watch any of the other thousands of titles on Netflix. Like, Dave Chappelle is just one title on Netflix, but for some reason people want that one taken down. Well, if you don't like it, why don't you just not watch it? Can we just go back to that? Like, if you don't like something, then just don't pay attention to it. Like, why does it have to be taken down? Just because you don't like it doesn't mean that nobody else can like it or nobody else should be able to see it. Oh, I hate that so much. Nobody should be able to see it. Why? Why shouldn't anybody be able to see it? Because it perpetuates violence towards trans people. No, nothing he said was encouraging any kind of violence towards trans people. And when people were saying that he had dead named Caitlyn Jenner because he refers to Caitlyn Jenner as Bruce Jenner at a point, if you notice, he also makes that point by referring to Muhammad Ali as Cassius Clay. So dead naming, if you don't know, is calling somebody their name before they made the transition. Well, Muhammad Ali didn't transition into a different gender, but he did become Muhammad Ali for religious reasons and his beliefs. And so, in a sense, Dave Chappelle also dead named Muhammad Ali when he called him Cassius Clay, but nobody pointed that out or got upset about that. Why is it that you care so much about one, but you don't notice the other? You know, you don't even notice the other. And he says his problem is with white people, which a lot of people are annoyed with white people on a certain level. You know, I personally go back and forth because I have a lot of really cool white friends. And then there's some white people that I just feel like, yeah, you just whine all the time. And I don't understand why. Then there were some women that were mad because he talked about shoving that woman in the trunk of his car, like killing her and shoving her in the trunk of his car. Which, if you haven't seen the special, it's because a woman like confronts him about his comedy in a parking lot. And he's like, I could stuff you in this trunk or kill you and stuff you in this trunk, bitch. But again, that goes back to absurdist. And right after he says it, he says, because he says he said that to her, and then he's like, I didn't really say that, but I thought it. And it's like, So he can't even think anything like that or make a joke about that. I told you already. He's borderline absurdist on some of the things that he says. So you just have to take it for what it is and laugh or don't. I don't know why it's always such a big thing. For me, the biggest thing that he mentioned, because he does talk about the trans community and what I think a lot of LGBT people, or as I keep reminding everybody, white LGBT people are upset about, is the fact that people feel like we already told you this isn't appropriate, Dave. We already told you we're not going to put up with this from you. And then he still says that kind of stuff anyway. And they're like, all right, bring out the digital whip. Apparently, we have a black man out of control right now that just won't listen to us. And get used to it, white people. Get used to it, white LGBT. You are no longer the deciders of what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. And I know when people talk about white privilege and stuff like that, I don't always buy into that. But in this case, I do buy into it because I think it is their privilege that makes them think that their opinions matter more than anybody else. There's millions of people across the country that are fine with Dave Chappelle's special, even thought it was funny. But for some reason, we're supposed to listen to this small group of white LGBT on whether or not we should be able to watch that, or even if it should exist on streaming, if it should even be allowed to be a title on Netflix. One of the producers, a white trans woman from Dear White People, was saying that she was no longer going to work for Netflix. Well, then don't work for Netflix. When they did that entire documentary about trans people and how trans people felt about the way that they were portrayed in media and movies for years and years and years, there were parts of that special that I didn't agree with. There were parts that I felt like weren't necessarily transphobic, that people were citing as transphobic, but I didn't email Netflix. I didn't threaten to have my account cut off. I didn't do any of that. It was like I said, it's just another title. I watched it. There were certain parts that were interesting. There were certain parts I didn't agree with. Overall, it was meh for me, like just as a show, a documentary, but I didn't think it was offensive enough that I wanted to make a big deal of it, and I don't know why anybody does. But what I wanted to say that I think is the most important is that he talks about a trans woman specifically by the name of Daphne Dorman. And he says that after he put out his special, that the trans community was going after him on Twitter, and he was like, he didn't care because Twitter isn't a real place. I think that pissed a lot of people off because there are a lot of quote unquote activists that are on Twitter and they feel like they're really important. And he just completely took their legs out from underneath them by saying Twitter's not a real place and I don't care what Twitter thinks about me. And I think that really pissed a lot of people off too, even though nobody would say that because they know that they'd sound just as trivial as they actually are if they acknowledge that that was one of the things that pissed them off. I really do feel like that is one of the things that pissed people off, is that he said that Twitter wasn't a real place, so he wasn't paying attention to Twitter. Nothing makes them madder than you telling them that their platform doesn't matter. But what he does say is that 6 days after this trans woman that he let open for him at a point and was friends with, 6 days after she put up a tweet defending him, she ended up killing herself, and they had dragged her all over Twitter, and he doesn't know if that was connected or not, but it's something that happened. And to me, I think it probably is something that hurt Daphne Dorfman and probably did contribute to her killing herself. But the LGBT community will never take into account the fact that they are bullying people at certain times. Like, I've literally been bullied by the online trans community. I didn't make a big deal of it, and I did fight back with them. I did argue with them, but there are people that still think that that was justified the way that they came after me. And they were telling me stuff like, there were trans people literally telling me things like they hope I get AIDS and die. There were people calling me faggot. I mean, like, all the hateful stuff that they claim to stand against was being told to me by trans people online. But if I argue back, if I say something just as hateful to you, or maybe even less hateful, but just really hitting at your truth, then you're going to report me, and then it turns into a thing where I've been saying this about trans people. Never mind what was said to me that I was responding to that made me say the thing that I said, or made me feel like I should say the thing that I said. You're just mad because I was better at being insulting, and the fact that I am not changing what I do or what I think because the trans community says, the online trans community, because I have to be very clear about that. I always say online trans community because I really want people in general, in the, in the public, in society at large, to know that everyday trans people aren't worried about the things that the online activist trans community make the biggest deal of. Like, that's just not what it is. And I really feel like the online trans community is making problems, and they're the ones that are putting everyday trans people in harm's way, because they go at people so hard and they really try to bully people to a point where it makes people think that they don't like trans people, not realizing that it's not trans people they don't like, it's the online activist trans community that they don't like. And it's very important to make that distinction, because the average trans person is worried about the same things you're worried about. In a lot of cases, they're worried about taking care of their families, taking care of themselves, making sure that their bills are paid, being able to get jobs. Like, the same things that we worry about are what everyday trans people are worried about. Everyday trans people aren't hanging on every word that Dave Chappelle says, waiting for him to either offend them or affirm them. I think that we need to go back to that. When Dave Chappelle said that he misses Stonewall gays, I feel the exact same way, because I feel like during that time, people were a lot tougher and a lot less worried about the minutia that people are worried about these days. I think it is a sign of everybody's privilege that people are actually able to worry about the things that they worry about. Like, somebody didn't use your proper pronouns. So what? What does it matter what they think about you? What matters is what you think about you. And that's what I always want to remind people. And that's what I think we need to put more focus on in the LGBT community at large. Not these little things, not these microaggressions that everybody's so upset about, but things that actually matter. Are people threatening your life? If nobody's threatening your life, then it's just words. If nobody's actually saying they're going to do anything to you, then it's just words. If somebody just has a difference of opinion, you say that trans women are the same as biological women, and somebody disagrees with that, that's not hate speech. It's just not. Some people feel that way. I personally feel that way, and the trans people I know all feel that way. Like, I have the most respect for my trans friends, because my trans friends actually get that there is a difference. Like, that's the thing. That's why it's a transition. If there wasn't a difference, you wouldn't have to transition. You would just already be that. But instead, you have to take hormones. You have to buy different clothes. You have to work on your voice in a lot of cases. So there's nothing wrong with just acknowledging that there is a difference. It's its own unique struggle. It's not the same as being a biological woman. Even the term biological woman, some people will get mad at that in the trans community, the online trans community. But it's like, why do you have such a problem with that? I just don't think that the things that they make a big deal of are necessarily a big deal. Then there's the argument of punching up versus punching down. Dave Chappelle is punching down. Well, if you really subscribe to punching up versus punching down thinking, which I've often said, I do not agree at all in punching down thinking, because I'm supposed to be down, right? Because I'm a gay man and I'm a person of color. I'm Mexican American. So I'm double down. You know what I mean? I'm all the way down because I'm what's considered a double minority. Well, what if I think I'm superior to most people? Which is what I think, especially when it comes to stand-up. I am literally superior to a lot of people. So I'm not going to accept that just because I'm brown and gay means that I'm beneath you. Just because you're white and straight doesn't make you above me. The fact that you're white and gay doesn't make you above me either. Like I said, for a long time, society has subscribed to that, like thinking that white people were the deciders of what's appropriate and what's acceptable. But I've never bought into that. When I was younger, it was implied that you were supposed to try to please white people on some level, because that was who was in charge of everything. Those were the bosses, those were the principals, those were the teachers in a lot of cases. It was all white people that were in the positions of authority. But it hasn't been that way for a long time now. And I think a lot of white people are having trouble making that adjustment. And I don't think it's really straight white people that are having trouble making that adjustment. I think it's a lot of white LGBT, to tell you the truth, that don't really fully get that. Like, they think their opinions are supposed to carry more weight, and they just don't. And I really do feel that we all, and this can go for gay, straight, trans, cisgender, whatever you want to say, everybody, just for everybody, worry more about what you think about you than what other people in the world think about you. And worry least of all what famous people think about the group that you're from or the group that you identify with. And stop trying to make other people believe that they're beneath other people just because of their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, their identity. Nothing makes you beneath anybody other than just being a shitty person. And that is what a lot of the online LGBTQ community doesn't want to accept. That in real life, a lot of them are shitty people. That's why they spend all of their time online trying to get people canceled that aren't thinking about them, aren't talking about them, don't care about them. Anyway, if we're going to get ahead, not only as LGBT, as a society, let's stop paying attention to what other people think about us and worry more about what we think of ourselves. That's what I would say. And this has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.